My name is Kirk Dunn, and this is the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. I'm an actor, writer, and knitter, and I'm also known as the Knitting Pilgrim. I earned that title because in 2003, I was awarded an Ontario Arts Council Chalmers grant to knit stitched glass, an installation of 3 large panels designed in the style of stained glass windows, which look at the commonalities and the conflicts between the 3 Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They took me 15 years to knit. And when the project was complete, my wife Claire and I wrote a play called The Knitting Pilgrim about my experience knitting stitched glass and my research into interfaith relations. One thing that wasn't covered in the play was the meaning behind the imagery in the knitted panels. So, this series explores each section in conversation because, ultimately, the project is about having conversations with empathy and curiosity about how we understand and sometimes misunderstand each other. Welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. Hi, welcome back to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. We're going to be talking about one of the panels in the Islamic window today. And just as a reminder, each panel features the dominant symbol of that particular faith. So in this Islamic panel, we have the crescent and the star of Islam. And then inside those that symbol, I have placed some images that speak of the positive images of the faith. And then outside the symbol are the more challenging or issues or questions that I had, and I think we all have when we think about the faiths and how they relate to each other and to us and to the world. And so today we're going to be looking at one of the panels or one of the images rather that is outside the image of the crescent and the star, and it is on the right side. It's there towards the bottom on the right hand side, and you can see 2 crossed rocket-propelled grenade launchers, or RPGs, and they're superimposed over an image of the one of the Buddha statues of the Bamiyan province. And these Bamiyan Buddhas were carved into sandstone cliffs in about the 6th century of the Common Era. And they were destroyed in March of 2001, so just before 9/11, by the Taliban government, who had declared them to be idols. And international opinion, and in fact most Muslims, strongly condemned the destruction. And to talk about a bit about the background about how this happened and how it relates, if at all, to the Islamic prohibition of idolatry, I'd like to welcome Dr. David Liepert. Dr. Liepert is a physician, a scientist, a theologian, and a Muslim community leader. He is the author of 2 books, Choosing Faith. It's currently in its 3rd reprinting in Saudi Arabia by the International Islamic Publishing House, and Muslim, Christian, and Jew, Finding a Path to Peace Our Faiths Can Share, which is published by Faith of Life Publishing here in Canada. He is also wrapping up work on his 3rd book, Different, Together, Forever. He's been a contributing columnist for the HuffPost and was the host of the podcast The Optimistic Muslim. Dr. Liepert is a co-founder of Calgary's award-winning Interfaith Council, where he learned that hospitality is our world's shared sacrament. And maybe that's because, in his words, when you share a meal, you sometimes have to stop talking and listen to others while you chew. He is currently Professor of Interfaith, Multi-Faith, and Post-Faith Relations at the Canadian Centre for Dean Studies in Toronto, Ontario. Dr. Liepert, welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks.
Thank you for having me. I thank you for an opportunity to discuss even the difficult issues about religious faith. So often people want to gloss over the things that separate us rather than talking about why they separate us and talking about the perspectives that drive that sort of thing. And if we don't understand the perspectives, because nobody ever thinks they're wrong. Nobody ever thinks they're evil. even though it may be obvious to us or any objective standard that people are in fact often wrong and people are sometimes evil. Figuring out how people get to that place where they are so horribly off of their path towards good is one of the most important things that we need to do in all of our religions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, in this particular instance, there are so many people who say this was just not a good thing to do. I'm wondering what was the Taliban reasoning behind this destruction? I mean, and how does that relate to the rest of Islam?
Oh, it's tragically simple how that theology is, and it's tragic because it is so simple and because it is so simplistic. The Quran says that there will be a group of approved Muslims always within the religion of Islam, within the practice of Islam. Like there are over 1 billion of us right now, right?
Yeah.
And not all of us are thinking the same things. Not all of us are doing the same things. But the Quran promises that there will always be a group that are doing the right things. And of course, everyone in any group convinces themselves that they are that group. Otherwise, they would change. They would find a different path. And so, when the groups like the Taliban commit evil acts of that sort, they're following the call to enjoin what is good and forbid what is wrong, which is a good thing, and to prevent the worship of idols instead of the regard for the God who created every one of us, which is kind of a central drive. So it's those two things. Because one of the things, it's just the Buddha, by many Muslims, is actually considered to have been a prophet. There are many, many prophets. Every religion that exists, according to Muslim teaching, had a prophet who was teaching the true path. And it's just Jesus, peace be upon him, is one of them. Prince Siddhartha, peace be upon him, is one of them. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is one of them. Moses, peace be upon him, is one of them. All of these individuals revealed the path to their people. The Quran also says that God has given each of us paths that we are meant to follow, and we will not follow each other's paths. And in fact, it says, even between belief and unbelief, if you are a believer, then act like a believer and don't argue with unbelievers. Simply compete with each other towards acts which are good. Like those verses are in the Quran. But then you have this idea that idol worship is bad because it distracts from the God who made us all. One of the troubles with idol worship is it actually creates this concept that there can be something other than God, and that there is only one path, which is kind of an abrogation of this concept that God has revealed many paths to many people. And so destroying idols becomes a good thing in that line of thought. And then the Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, peace be upon him, more specifically, creating images of one of God's prophets that could itself become a distraction from God, becomes an offense against that prophet as well. Right. And that's how you get to that place while thinking that you're doing something good in the religion of Islam. Right.
And now, Muhammad himself, he destroyed a number of idols and statues and things when he reclaimed Mecca. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's just the interesting point there is there were idols that were not prophets. There were idols that were There was some specific angels that were considered to be distractions. One of the things that he did not destroy, for example, is there was a picture of Jesus, peace be upon him, and his mother Mary, peace be upon her. Muhammad didn't destroy that one. He simply covered it. And it's just his insight making those distinctions is something that a prophet is capable of doing. Like Moses, peace be upon him, made very specific distinctions when he was interacting with Egypt. But it's not something that we're actually given the insight about how to do those things. We're actually enjoined to just compete with each other in good deeds.
And so this idea of and does this also play into the tradition of not portraying Muhammad in any visual representation as well? Because you don't want.
Well,
that.
This is an interesting one because there's actually lines of jurisprudence that say that, for instance, if it's obviously not Muhammad, peace be upon him, like in a cartoon, you can actually theoretically, in some contexts, do a cartoon version, some sort of a representation, something that doesn't actually look like a actual real person. Also, 200 years ago, it was very, very common to go to pray and worship at the graves of saints, even in Islam. But one of the movements that came out of Saudi Arabia is there was a fellow by the name of Ibn Wahab who created an entire line of theology, which, because it was the line of theology that is the preferred one by the Saud family, it has become a very pervasive line of theology in Islam, and the followers of Ibn Wahab completely condemn any of the worship of graves of saints, any representation of idols, any representation of prophets, and that's kind of informed the behavior of the most exclusive branches of Islam, of which the Taliban is probably the most current, most pervasive example.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting to hear that idea that, or the reminder too that Islam has changed and evolved and had various influences throughout its history, and yeah, you're speaking of Papism. There is a good, really good reminder of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It just I have Christian family members, for instance, who were participatory in the January 6 riots in Washington. And they were following the rules in Christianity about appropriate regard and respect for divinely appointed leaders. So those were the verses that they were following. They didn't think they were doing anything wrong either. I told them, I was texting with them in real time, and I was saying, as kind of the family expert on terrorism, what you are doing, using fear and force for a political end in a religious context, that's actually the definition of religious terrorism. But they didn't think so. They thought they were doing something that was right too. It's tragic how easy it is to do bad things in the name of something good.
Right. Right. And does that come from a very subjective point of view? Is that what that's about? The genesis of that is that we're so concerned with seeing things from just our point of view, from this one perspective, that we can then therefore shut out all the others. They're wrong and incorrect, and we're able to just do things because there is only one way forward.
Yeah, it's even the concept or the principle of religious excommunication, which exists in Islam too. Mm-hmm. Like the Christian phrase, of course, excommunication. You're no longer allowed to take communion,
Yep.
but also you stop communicating with people, you stop talking to them, you push them outside of your community. In Islam, it's called uh, uh, the practice of takfir, where you actually declare someone purposefully wrong. To be a kafir, you have to be someone who knows they're wrong, but is propagating what is wrong for bad purposes, which of course is rarely what drives even these religious abuses that we're talking about. Um, but it's like this political practice of exclusion for the purposes of self-definition. Like honestly, this is why, like my first book, the first book you talked about, Choosing Faith. I basically in that book just laid out why I chose to follow the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, down the path of Islam from the perspective of a Christian. Like I tell people, I followed Jesus into Islam, peace be upon him. And that's what that book is. And you'll notice it was published in Saudi Arabia, and it's in its third or maybe even its fourth reprinting right now. It's an extremely popular mainstream Muslim book. My second book, A Muslim Christian Jew, Finding a Path to Peace Our Faiths Can Share, that one, it was published in Canada because it's a little out there from the perspective of even mainstream Islam, because even though the concepts are mainstream, I'm basically saying, you know what, these are all good paths.
Yeah.
This is what the paths say. We should just follow them and treat each other well.
Right.
And it's just do what the Quran says, compete in good deeds and acts. But
Muhammad himself said that in effect too, did he not? He said that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every prophet of God has said the same thing, which is God made everything. God is responsible for making everything good. Just do good yourself.
Right.
And it's like, don't do, I have this thing called the rule of the 9-year-old girl. If the world is going towards a place of hope and safety for a 9-year-old girl, it's a good world. And that's because when I came up with that rule, my oldest daughter was 9 years old. And I sort of said, my job is to make a good world for people like my 9-year-old daughter. My third book, the third book that I actually don't know if I'm ever going to get it published, because it basically goes on from physics and quantum mechanics and says everybody is right. God has made this multiverse where everybody gets to be right. Everybody gets to go to heaven. How is that going to be acceptable with any sort of a organized religious context? But that's actually there for us to see if we choose to see it.
Right. Well, I've read the manuscript of that book, and it was fascinating, and I would love to see that book published, because it's one of the things that I think is lacking in the world, and one of my great laments about religion and science and the way our world sees those two things is that we very rarely see that they're entwined, and we think they are two solitudes and they can't be brought together. And your message of universalism is certainly something that I can see as well, and have heard quite a bit of pushback about it.
Because how can you have a functioning organized religion that acknowledges that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes? Like, in fact, that may be the most complex philosophy that we need to be right with our God and Creator.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap this up, and thank you again, Dr. Liepert, for some fabulous thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to contact Dr. David Liepert, please reach out to me at kirkdunn.com, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with him. This has been an episode of the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. We'd like to thank the Ontario Arts Council for their support of this conversation series and their funding of Stitch Class, and the Toronto Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts for their support of the Knitting Pilgrim Show. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this about interfaith matters, stitched glass, and knitting, please check out our episodes at kirkdunn.com or the Knitting Pilgrim YouTube channel.